women, we all have our story. We have a story, but there's a part of us deep down inside that wants more. We just don't know how to go about getting it because of the noise outside, the judgment, the fear, the shame. And so we keep her buried.
Welcome to the podcast, The Whole and Complete Woman, where we provide practical tips and strategies for achieving your health, wealth, and relationship goals and desires. Yes, I said desires because God does not put desires in our heart just to tease us. So it's important to me that you are empowered with the tools and resources to not only fulfill your goals, but to create a life you love and create a legacy, because the people who come after us, they are depending on us to pave the way. So I congratulate you for being here. Not only will today's content help your future self, but also those that come behind us. And that looks different for everyone, which I love. So let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. We have Dr. Tashina Reeder here. I am going to go ahead and introduce her. She has so many accomplishments. Dr. Reeder is an award-winning international keynote speaker. She's a 3-time best-selling author and an elevation life coach. She is a licensed therapist with a doctorate in couples and family therapy and a master's in social work. She has nearly 23 years of clinical experience, and she offers really a unique approach that empowers global audience, so people all over the world, to break through emotional roadblocks of self-sabotage, helping them build confidence and really transform their minds to help them heal, rise, and shine. Her expertise has led her to speak on many major stages worldwide and deliver dynamic keynotes really to a diverse international audiences. She has been on many stages all over the world. She is the founder of Soul Care Services and Manifesting Her Academy. So Dr. Reeder has a proven track of really helping women refine them or redefine themselves and realign with purpose after adversity. So her holistic services teach, treat, and inspire women to overcome insecurities and self-sabotage, which really leads to a powerful life of self-love, abundance, and success. The impact of her work is evident in the lives of her clients and those who have really had any type of interaction with her. She's really big on personal growth and transformation. So she's published several books. I want to mention those again. 3-time best-selling author. I actually have them here for those that are watching. You're able to see, but we have the Manifesting Her. 7 strategies to redefine your identity after trauma, build big confidence, and cultivate self-love. And then her next book is Manifesting Her. So this was an anthology that was put together with several other people, including myself. And then she has And Still She Rise. And this one is a devotional and journal for personal healing. So she is the visionary of these books. And I am just so excited to have her here today. Dr. Tashina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Newsome. Thank you for having me on your platform. I tell you, every time I hear my bio, I'm taken aback and think like, wow, God, you really using me. You're using me.
Yes,
Right?
and there's so much more to you as well. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us your story. Tell us how you got here. Not here on the show, but just in life.
Right. Well, outside of that amazing description of my professional achievements, I wasn't always that person. In fact, I was a very insecure individual. Like many of us, we've had our drama and trauma in life. They kind of cultivate how we see ourselves and how we see the world, and as a result of all of that, it really caused me to hide, right? And so, fast forward through my healing journey, healing, rising, and shining, I found purpose in really working with women who are struggling in the areas that I'm very familiar with, the insecurities, the hiding, the fear of judgment. And I do all of that in the little old city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia, PA is where I am located. And so, I tell you, the people who I interact with come, cross paths with, whether professionally or personally, has not only enriched my life, but also add to my ability to pour out and pour into other women. And so, outside of that, I'm an auntie of two amazing nephews, AJ and Tyler. AJ is going off to college in the fall. I'm like, oh, my baby, my firstborn nephew, and then you have the 8-year-old. And so they are like my children. I call them nephew sons. And so I am blessed to have them, friend, auntie, sister, all of that. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And I'm a bit adventurous. I like to do some adventurous things. And, I went skydiving and all types of amazing things just to, live life. Right?
I love that.
Yeah.
When you said skydiving, there was a time in my life I went skydiving in 2019, and it was something that I was always like, okay, I'm never going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason was simply because I'm scared,
Mm-hmm.
and during that season of my life, I was really in just a place of like, if I'm scared, I'm just going to do it. So there, you could easily see me, in Jamaica or somewhere, like jumping into the blue hole, doing like all the things. Like I'm just, everything that I'm scared to do, I'm just going to do it. So skydiving was one of those things. And it was quite the adventure. It's nothing that I'll do again. I'm okay. I did it. And, but I was able to overcome that. Now it's like I don't have that fear holding me back in that place, and just had that experience in life. So I love that.
Yeah.
So I want to jump right into your books, because you've got some good books here. So this is the first one that I purchased of yours, which is The Manifesting Her. And I know a lot of your story, your life story is in this book here. So what inspired you to write Manifesting Her?
To be honest, that was a 7-year journal. And, as I was saying earlier, as I was speaking to, that we all have our drama and trauma in life. And as a result of my own trauma, I just took notes. I just journaled through a time in my life that was very dark. I, was in a marriage that was emotionally abusive. While in that marriage, I contracted HIV from my husband. And then 2 years later, fell ill with stage 2 cancer. And so I felt that my life was over. I really lost a sense of who I was. I became depressed. I used food to as comfort, so I gained a lot of weight. I even considered suicide at one point because I just felt like my life was over. And so as a result of all of that, I remember just writing, and I wrote books upon books of those composition books, right? I would
Mm-hmm.
use that and I would just write. Sometimes I would just scribble because that's how I felt in the moment. And, that was a 7-year journey. And I remember falling to my knees, screaming to God that I was tired. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. And I promise you, it felt like the snap of a finger, things changed. I put myself in therapy. Yes, a therapist, went to therapy. And as a result of my doing my own heart work, it was laid on my heart to write this book. And initially, the title wasn't Manifesting Her. It was really called My Name is Victory.
Mm.
And the more I began to do the heart work and I start talking more about what it was I desired to do, I remember being prayerful, like, there's something in me. We all have something in us. We feel it. We can see it sometimes. You can, just describe it. And it was me describing the woman I wanted to become. And I was like, manifesting her. I want to manifest that person in me. And so that's how I got the title, Manifesting Her. And I'm always asked that question because I believe we all, as women, we all have our story. We have a story, but there's a part of us deep down inside that wants more. We just don't know how to go about getting it because of the noise outside, the judgment, the fear, the shame. And so we keep her buried. And so the trauma in my life, I had to really work through and cultivate a way of loving myself again and redefining myself and not getting caught up in that shame. And so manifesting her, that book is really my memoir added with a blueprint, so to speak, of steps that women can take to work through their own challenges. And so that was how that book was birthed. It was really me being fully open and transparent with my life story in hopes that it would bless someone else.
I thank you for sharing that right now. Every time I hear that story about, what happened with your marriage and contracting HIV and then getting cancer, like it literally gives me chills every single time that I hear that. And you have overcome so many things. Inside of your book, I know that you talk about a lot of the strategies and things like that women can implement. What are some of the things that women can do to really redefine their identity after going through trauma?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think for all of us, anyone dealing with any difficult situation that brings about uncomfortable emotions, I think the first thing we need to do is acknowledge it. We're good at hiding, right? You may have heard the terminology or that kind of phrase coined as wearing the mask, right? So we all have a mask that we wear. And so acknowledging what it is, you may have heard of radical acceptance, just accepting the reality of what it is, accepting those emotions because they're your emotions and they're valid, right? It's not so much what has happened to you, what's wrong with you, but rather what has happened to you, right? And so acknowledging the feelings that has come about of the experience, that's the first step. We have to say what it is. I'm angry. I'm sad. Again, it's not that anything's wrong with you, but you're having an experience. So acknowledge that. So I think acknowledgement is the first step in the journey of healing. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge, right? So
Yeah.
acknowledging is the first step. And then I believe the next step is really you doing the work to unpack it. So that can be with a therapist, right? Especially if you're digging deep into a traumatic experience. I think therapists who are trained to handle those your experiences to treat what comes from trauma, like your depression or anxiety you may be experiencing. If you're not ready for therapy, which is fine because I hear people say that often, I'm not ready for therapy, but a trusted friend that you kind of talk to about to kind of comfort you and to kind of validate your feelings, acknowledging what the experience is, the feeling comes about, and what can I do to unpack this so that I can begin my healing journey. So the first two steps, I normally tell women that's the beginning of the journey.
Yeah, I love that, especially that part about acknowledge inside of our hormone compass program. We everything's about being in alignment. So even when I was reading some things in your bio, I was like, "Ooh, I love this." Even those words were used, and we align, and the first thing is to acknowledge and then listen and then inquire, like what's going on inside of me, because those traumas can get trapped inside of our body that creates stress within ourselves, like a physiological stress that sometimes people get stuck in, and then that disrupts our hormones. So I love that you're a therapist, and then also from just like a holistic standpoint, it's always about taking that multi-therapeutic approach, like it's not just like one thing, like even with health, like we have to look at what's going on mentally with people too. So I just love that about just the acknowledging and then the taking the steps. Sometimes like you say, I know for myself, there's always been, growing up, Black and Brown community, there's that stigma around therapy, like we just don't go to therapists, and really we don't go to doctors either, so it is sometimes taking those steps, but when we do and we really bring in the people and that support system that may have gone through similar things or have the knowledge and training, or both, like in your case, we're really able to impact women in a positive way and help them heal and things like that. What are some things that you have seen that have really helped women to really build like big confidence after experiencing trauma?
Yeah. Um, I have a phrase that says imperfect progress is progress, right? I think all too often we're hard on ourselves, right? And so when we're taking on that challenge, I call it a challenge because change isn't easy, right? Because if it was easy to change, we all would have done it, by now, right? Some areas in our lives, there's some things that we can do quickly, and there's some things that take time. So I always tell women, listen, imperfect progress is progress, and give yourself grace. And so in the midst of that, I really help them, give them space to feel safe. I believe transparency is healing. So I'll share about, some of the challenges of healing, right? It's a sensitive journey. It's your own journey. It's a personal journey, right? And it's a journey that should not be rushed. That is time, it takes time, right? So give yourself grace and understand that imperfect progress is process, because we're all the work in progress. And so those are my two kind of phrases I use with women, and give them a space to talk and to just be
Yeah.
without feeling they have to be one way, present as one way versus being authentically them. I don't want to do this. This is hard, right? Just being honest. And I think that's where it is. Sometimes we don't give ourselves the space to do just that.
Yeah, I love that. Go a little deeper into that. Tell me about how women can really like set healthy boundaries to protect their energy and well-being.
Ooh, the word boundary.
Yes,
That's
yes, yes.
a tough one for men. I think sometimes in the course of our lives, we've had time when we struggle with creating boundaries, right? Especially, I find that women struggle with boundaries in relationships with their partners or in their marriage or someone who they
Yeah.
may be with, and even sometimes the children. But in general, I always ask women to tell me their core values. What are your core values, right? What are your negotiables and non-negotiables? And what I find, and I don't know about you, but I don't have conversations with my friends and even my parent of what your core values are. Hey, girl, what's your core values? Papa, so what's your core?
Yeah, that's not a normal
We don't do
question.
that, right? Right. And all the times I find we struggle to identify them. So I
Yeah.
do the work around core values because that's where you begin to develop your boundaries, what you're going to accept and not accept, right? And I always talk about, having them identify what's important to them in their lives, whether it's family, whether it's God first, family, work. What are some behaviors that you are accepting of in terms of treatment, respect, honesty, loyal? Like we kind of identify those kind of characteristics, those behaviors, and we prioritize them. Because we all have boundaries. We don't realize that we're enforcing them. And so we'll pick apart different kind of scenarios of events, and be, oh, I said that's a boundary, right? But I think the challenge is, depending on who we're setting boundaries with, sometimes we have an occasion to undermine our own boundaries because of our own fear of rejection, or afraid of saying no, right? So we forgo the boundary. And so I think boundaries is something that we have to learn and cultivate. And it's okay to change them. And sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to sit in that boundary and then ask ourselves, why am I uncomfortable with enforcing the boundary? Because
Yeah.
the boundary is for you, not for the person.
Yeah, and it really is like it's an important aspect of, like you said, like us really living in alignment with our core values. When you said that, the boundary thing, because I teach boundaries, delegation, like all of those things are important for us to really have like lives that we enjoy and,
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling lives, And for me, with boundaries, boundaries used to be really hard for me to set because I'd have the fear, like if I told this person no, or, but usually it's like a no, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
like, or setting a boundary where someone can't do something, or, it's something that I'm having to have some kind of it may feel confrontational inside, but my fear was always, when I really dig deep and do that inner work, was, oh, I'm scared they're going to leave me, you know? So it's like, well, I'd rather just kind of be ran over a little bit, or allow my boundaries to be bent, just so that I don't have to um maybe be alone, and a lot of times it's just the fear, and it's a younger part of ourself that, there was some kind of trauma. And sometimes trauma isn't even like big things, it can be little things that were just, something happened where we were left alone, or we were told we were bad or we're not good enough. It's all those different triggers, and we're like sitting with it. When you go and sit with it, you can come in as the 40-year-old version or the 15-year-old version and let her know, like, okay, sweetie, you're not alone, and I get that you're scared, but we're going to do this, and you find, and you tell me if you find this with your clients as well, that when women start implementing boundaries, people a lot of times don't leave, it's actually builds like a healthier relationship with the people that are supposed to be in our lives. And then sometimes people aren't. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I think when you begin to enforce the boundaries, people then have a newfound respect for the boundary. And I tell women, if people aren't able to adhere to the boundaries, then that's okay too. But then you get to decide how you choose to interact with them, right? You get to decide that relationship, whether you interact with them differently or end it, right? But we have to decide, what that would look like for us. But I believe when you start to enforce the boundaries, most people don't leave. They'll say, "Oh, okay," or they may even apologize, or "I'm so sorry, that I hurt you," or whatever the case, whatever it was that had happened. And so, but you're right. There are times where you are uncomfortable, depending on who it is you're enforcing these boundaries with, right? But for the most part, people will adhere to it. And if they don't, then they don't. And then again, you get to decide how you move forward.
Yeah. And another thing that I think about with just, it kind of falls into the realm of boundaries. One thing I have my clients do is they go through this entire exercise of finding out like their goals and their vision for their life and all of these things. And they, through the process, they end up with like their top 5 goals. And this could be in their spiritual life, it could be in their health, it could be in their business or their work, their family, all of those areas. And when you're super clear on those, it makes it easy to say no to other things. If someone's asking you to do something and you're like, wait, okay, these are my goals right now, that doesn't align with those goals. So yeah, no, I'm not able to do that. That's not in line with like my vision and my purpose and what I'm doing right now. And if it is something that you're like, well, I need, I want to say yes to that, then maybe revisit the goals. But it's like a good kind of compass of like, what am I actually spending my time and my energy and things doing every day?
I think that's a good point, and I call that integrity.
Mhm.
You're demonstrating integrity to your values, and you're being consistent and aligned, as we were saying earlier. When you're able to look at it, and if you're clear of, does this feel good? Does this mesh with what it is that I'm doing? And so, yeah, that's big. I think many of us struggle with. I know there were times where I struggled with that. Like, okay, this don't fit or don't feel right, but I want to help. Oh, I want to, right? And it's okay to say no, and say maybe a different time, or or just explain why there's a no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah,
And sometimes also like, no, thank you that's like a complete sentence.
there's a
No
no.
is a complete sentence. And then also like, no, thank you. That's a complete sentence too, So depending on the relationship. But just speaking of relationships, now I know that you are the founder of Soul Care Services and Manifesting Her Academy. So tell me a bit about what you have seen as like the importance of community and having support networks while you're in the healing process and even after.
Yeah. And so, Soul Care Services and Manifesting Her Academy are kind of two different platforms. So when you think of the Soul Care Services, that's my clinical practice where I teach and, and do really the um, deeper work underneath of, kind of the history behind the etiology of what's happening that is manifested as the fear or the shame or whatever, right? And then on the Manifesting Her Academy side, it's more so me providing a blueprint of how to practical steps to live your life, to work through whatever those challenges may have that are being presented. And so what I find in both my clinical practice and my platform, my life coaching platform, some of the common challenges in terms of engaging in kind of the healing journey, whether it's through life coaching or a therapy, is fear. The confidence of not being able to do it, or the confidence in knowing that they could do it or she can do it. The fear of judgment, of talking about a struggle. And so they kind of, I see it comes about in both areas. And it's normal. I think because you're human, it's called the complexity of being human. So
Yeah.
they kind of intermingle in both areas. And so I think, or even a little bit of trusting themselves through the process of healing, or the feeling of expressed feelings of impatience.
Yeah, like wanting like, okay, I need this to be
Right.
over. Or like, why am I still grieving this? Or why do I still get triggered? Or why aren't I further along? I see
Mm-hmm.
that a lot myself too.
Yeah. So there are commonalities in both. I haven't experienced, well, one that's more dominant than the other. I think they still have commonalities. I just address them differently. Because one is treatment, one is more of kind of a guide of demonstrating the how tos.
Yeah. I think either way, like women come to us because we have that roadmap for them,
Yeah.
and those proven systems that they can navigate things through. So even if there's that fear there, or just, I don't want to call it, it's not incompetence, because the
Mm-hmm.
women that we work with, I know the women that you work with as well, are very smart, high achieving women, women that are able to like get things done, but sometimes when it comes to their mental health or even their physical health, sometimes it's like, I don't even know where to start, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And they want to do the right thing, they don't want to be out here wasting their time, their energy, their money on things that don't work. So really having those systems in place, those structures in place, that roadmap for women is something that's super, super helpful. I have a question when it comes to Black and brown women, and what kind of things do you see, or what unique challenges do you see that we normally face in our healing journey or even our self-love journey? What do you see in your private practice and also in the Manifesting Her Academy as well?
Culture plays a big part of some of the kind of challenges with Black and brown women, specifically, kind of the narrative of the standard of beauty, or the narrative of how you should look in terms of weight, size, how's your hair, colorism. Um, I think some of the challenges is feeling that you have to work harder to be seen, or the feeling of being invisible because you're working harder. I think with Black and brown women, I think some of the challenges also is this assumed role of what it is you're supposed to do, and that it's not okay to dream sometimes because you have all these other responsibilities. So I think women sometimes struggle with one identity in terms of who am I, even in the culture, even in how I see myself, even in the context of marriage, even in maybe I'm a single mom. Who am I in all of these roles? Because we wear many hats, right? We wear many hats. Who am I in this, right?
Yeah.
And spiritually, I always say, well, who does God say that you are? right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And I think when they begin to really take off, I think I call it the lens of experiences. We have a bunch of imagine a bunch of sunglasses on your face. You have 1,001 sunglasses. Some of the sunglasses are darkened. Some of the sunglasses have holes in it. So we're looking at life and ourselves through these different lenses. And so I always challenge my ladies, our Black and brown sisters, of what are the messages you're listening to? Like, what are some of the themes, the common themes? I've heard things such as, women who have children, who are married, that, there's an expectation that, you're home, you do all these roles, you define roles. But when you have time to really dive in deep in what is that your purpose. And so now it's about figuring out how to do that, this kind of harmony, if you will. We always hear that term, work-life balance, right? I
Yep.
don't know about y'all, but I don't always know how to find balance. I'm like, balance where, right?
Yeah, I like to look at it more like work-life sustainability, like balancing doesn't even sound fun as far as, I work with women balancing their hormones. That's one thing. That's like what's going on physiologically. But when you think about like your life and
Mhm.
then your work, and then I always look at it as like, imagine you're standing on like one foot and then you have all these different things like tossed at you, like you're almost juggling. Like that does not sound fun at all. Like, why am I even trying to do this? Like, it's more like, okay, how can I create my life in a way that there's sustainability there, that there's harmony, all of those types of things.
And I always tell my sisters, first, to be stable, what's your foundation, right? Whether that's your faith, whether it's your circle of support, you need to be grounded in something so you can hold it. And Monday gonna look different from Friday, and Friday gonna look
Yep.
different from Wednesday, right? And that's okay. But I think mostly, with the cultural aspect and just some of these narratives that we hear about women and how we internalize them, kind of picking apart that because they have roots. They grow
Yep.
these deep roots that becomes our belief system, and it becomes these messages in our thoughts that are screaming at us, and then we'll forego the opportunity, or we won't,
Yeah.
or we give up on something, or we won't study as hard, And so it's a lot. I think as women, our Black and brown women, we're faced with a lot of things that we have to really unpack and reprioritize, or redefine for ourselves for it to make sense for us.
Yeah.
And trusting in that I can do that. But I've done that. This is proof that I can do this, right? Like you said, if I'm afraid, I'm gonna do it. If it's anything I'm afraid of, I'm gonna go ahead and just do it. And
Yeah.
that's the stretch. I always say there is a blessing in the stretching. So embrace the
Yeah.
stretch of growth, even in the fear.
And it's
Especially when
sometimes
that
like,
happens.
sorry to interrupt you. It's sometimes when those hard moments come up, we have to look to all that evidence that, I have done hard things. I have transitioned and moved through fear. Like, I am fully supported by like all of life. Like, all things are always working out for my good. Like, we have to look towards the evidence that's already like been around us. But then it makes me think of the scripture, faith is being sure of those things hoped for and certain of those things not seen. So sometimes when we are in that faith walk, it's we're not quite seeing the future. We have certainty inside of it. And we can also lean on the remembrance and knowing like God has brought us through things before. We have navigated life. We're able to do really hard things when it comes. Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying absolutely, I agree with you. We can do hard things all the
Yep.
time. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to, accept our greatness, right?
Mm.
Um, I think sometimes we don't. And
Yeah.
that's another podcast. Just the
It
whole because to be honest, I remember growing up, the message for me was remain humble, right? Don't boast about the blessings. I'm like, but God did these things, and
Yes.
it didn't help when you hear people tell you you're getting too big for your don't get too big for your bridges. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
It
So these
is
are
mixed
factors.
messages.
Mhm,
Yep.
mhm.
It is mixed messages when we kind of have this thing where we shouldn't brag, we shouldn't we shouldn't be prideful at all, which I
Mhm.
agree with, but like we shouldn't like put ourselves out there, like look like we're trying to be better than other people. And but then at the same time, we're supposed to work really, really hard, like both of us are doctors. We didn't just this didn't just happen overnight. We put years and years and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars into our education, our time, all of that. But that's also something that was instilled in us at the same time. So it's like work really hard for these achievements, but then like don't really tell people about them, And like you said, like when you hear your own bio, you're like, oh, that's me, and it's like sometimes we have to reflect back to one another, you know like, yeah, you're it. Like you are doing big things. You are here walking in your purpose. You have accomplished a lot, and yes, you've been through hard things and you have overcome, because there's other people that need to hear those stories. They need to know that there's hope for them in this moment in their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think about the anthologies that you have written. So, in your most recent anthology, And Still She Rise,
Mhm.
a devotional and journal for personal healing, what are some of the common themes or experiences that are shared by women in your newest anthology?
This, to be honest with you, that book, that piece was actually another journal that I had started. And I was prayerful about it because And Still She Rise was actually a summit that I do every year. And this year, um, God laid on my heart, finish that journal, that book you started. And I called it And Still She Rise. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. And I think the common thread of the women who are co-contributors of the book, they're women of faith. And it wasn't intentional. It was just women who I asked. I was prayerful about women who I asked, like, Lord, show me who to ask to be part of this book, because I wanted it to be an impactful reading. I wanted it to be short, but impactful. That women would read and feel inspired, that they would maybe be challenged in their thinking, or validated, right,
Yeah.
in their experience. Like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy, or I'm not alone. And so when I presented the book, everyone said yes.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, I just gave directions of how it should be written, and everyone came from scripture. I'm like, yes,
Yes.
beautiful,
Yep.
right? And so the women in the book, the common theme was they were women of faith.
Yep.
And they share a little bit about their experience, but it was more so words of hope, encouragement. Some of the writings were affirming and challenging how you see yourself, giving your permission to cry, giving yourself permission to know that, allowing you to know that you're God's handiwork, that you already have what you need within you. One of the authors really brought me to tears when the way she wrote it was as if she was writing a letter to you, as if God was saying, I'm proud of you. I love
Mm,
you. I'm like, that is powerful, because we don't oftentimes hear such words. And to read that, it's like, oh my gosh, So I thought each author added a piece of them, because I believe that what they wrote was something that also blessed them as well.
yeah.
And so I think that the theme was the women, but there were also women with some experience and women who loved God,
Yeah.
and all of them
I
wanted to help women. And so, yeah,
All of them were what?
wanted to have a passion of helping women.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because it's bigger than ourselves.
Mhm.
I I read my own chapter this morning, like when I pulled out the book, and I was like, "Ooh, that's good." Like it spoke to me, and my chapter is about um be still and know that I am God. And it was a time when one day I was just in the bathroom and I was crying. I was in the middle of leaving like a very volatile marriage. and, trying to figure out how I'm going to put my life back together. I had two little girls, and, I just heard God say, be still, be still and know that I am God. So for our listeners, pick up this book. You're able to find it on my website, Dr. Tashina's website, Amazon, all the places. And we can even link it down in the show notes for this as well. That will make it easy. But absolutely, very, very good book. So you've got some exciting things coming up. Okay. So there is a retreat that's coming up in the Bahamas. Yes, yes, yes. It is October 17th through the 20th. I will be there. Dr. Tashina will be there, and we've got a couple other speakers. This is Dr. Tashina's vision. This is her retreat. It's called the Release Retreat. It's really about empowerment and wellness. Share with me the vision and the goals that you have for this upcoming retreat and the women that are going to be attending.
This the title alone is telling. Release. We all have moments where we just want to release whatever that may look like for you. To cry, to scream, just to let go, just to be. And so the idea of having it in the islands, one, it's an escape, right? Like, change of
Oh,
scenery.
yeah.
Does the heart good? Like when you change your scenery, that in of itself is healing, right? So you're around warm water, warm weather. It's beautiful. And then the idea is just to be in a serene atmosphere. I believe that, the atmosphere can change even how we see ourselves and our thinking, because you have a moment to exhale, release, right? So the
Yes.
goal of this is not just to empower you, to remind you of who you are and remind you of who you're not, right? Also to remind you of the power that lies within and remind you who God told you that you are, that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. I think, when we engage in the day-to-day stuff, we forget. We got to be reminded of who we are. We are what they say back in the day, you're the bomb.com. We are the bomb.com, right? And, just to engage in wellness activities, we're going to do some breathing work. There are going to be workshops that will speak to your wellness, your well-being, your health. But there will also be workshops to talk about your mindset, right? Really diving deep into our narratives of how we see ourselves, kind of shaking things up a bit, so that you can go back and feel transformed, but you have work to do, that you feel empowered, like, you know what, oh my gosh, I feel better. Oh, I didn't know that. And the goal is also to provide a space where we feel safe to cry if we need to. Sometimes we don't have a space to cry and connect with other like-minded women, to network with women who will be there, to connect with other sisters who have similar stories, right? Because the women are not alone. We're not alone in this. And so the goal is to create an atmosphere where we could have healthy conversations, some real, I call it grown folk conversations, that oftentimes we may be afraid to talk about because we don't want to feel shamed or embarrassed, because vulnerability can be a little scary, right? But in this atmosphere, we're going to just give each other love and just pour into each other through speakers like yourself and the other speakers that will be present to teach, right? And to uplift. Because I believe we all have the capacity to heal, rise, and shine. And so hopefully at the end
Yes.
of the conference, they will do all those things: heal, rise, and shine, right?
I love that. I am so excited for this. I know that you have put together all kinds of activities and
Yeah.
experiences that will really contribute to the women that are present there, their
Mm-hmm.
healing, their personal growth, really helping them to redefine their identity, build confidence,
Mm-hmm.
cultivate that self-love, like all of those types of things. So I'm expecting amazing things with this retreat. That there's just,
Experience, right?
yes.
We're in the Bahamas, right? The
Yep.
culture, the food, all of that,
I
right?
love that you even put on the flyers that it's an experience, because it's not just about like coming and learning and there's speakers and we're going to be there taking notes. It's like an entire experience of healing. But then, like you said, like having the sunshine on my skin, hearing the water, seeing the
Mhm,
water in the ocean, having that time just to ourselves is so
mhm,
important. One thing that I recently did was I started working out early in the morning. Like sometimes I'll do it at 6, but then I
mhm.
feel rushed. And then so I've been doing it at 5. And I just realized like even that like gives me like an extra hour to just have a moment where I can have my thoughts to myself and I'm not like rushing and doing things. But this retreat is going to be like an entire experience of
Yeah,
like that time. And like oftentimes as women, we don't allow ourselves, like we don't give back to ourselves. We're always giving to everybody else, making sure that everybody else is okay. And then we're wondering why we're worn out, tired, exhausted, irritable. Hormones may have something to do with that. They need to be balanced. But in general, giving back to ourselves is a really important thing.
yeah,
And being able to rest and relax, that is so important. And have those safe spaces.
yeah.
You brought up that every single time. I mean, women, when we cry, the first thing that comes out of our mouth is, I'm sorry. We like literally begin to apologize when we have tears, like water, liquid, fluid, body fluids coming from our eyes. Like it's a totally natural thing. And oftentimes it's a gift that God gave us. I know when I have a good cry, I feel good afterwards. I usually need a nap, but it's like I needed to get that out. Like I've been walking around with this inside and it's just so healing. So I'm just so excited for this upcoming retreat in the Bahamas.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just know that you've put together so many amazing, amazing things. So I'm excited about that. We'll make sure to put the registration link in the show notes for
Mhm.
those that are listening and want to attend. So you'll be able to just click on that and register for that retreat. So, Dr. Tashina, I have absolutely loved having you on the show. We have talked about so many important things around redefining identity, building confidence, being able to talk, set boundaries, and how important that is, and then self love. I have loved these conversations with you. Do you have any like closing remarks, or if there were just like one thing that you wanted to leave our audience with, one piece of advice, what would that be?
Um, I'll give a few. One is this
Okay.
saying is imperfect progress is progress. All right. So just keep doing the work. To give yourself grace, right? Make a mistake, that's fine. Learn from it and keep going. Nothing changes if nothing changes. It's one thing to talk about it, but we also have to be about it, right? So we have to be in a place to do the hard work, to align with who it is that we say we want to become, right? And just know that you already have it in you. So I dare you to be an active participant in your wellness. I dare you to be an active participant in your growth. It's already done. You just got to take the first step.
I love that. I love that you said I dare. It reminds me of being a kid and like truth or dare, and it's like, if there is something fearful here, like there's nothing naughty going on here either, these are all like Dr. Tashina has really, um, yeah, she's daring you to really like take care of yourself, to keep going, to not avoid the uncomfortable situations or the feelings that come up inside, and to really grow. So, and remember, for those that are listening, people need you. Like they need you to be able to fully show up, and God desires to heal you.
Mm,
From the things that you have been through in your life, there is a like that is a desire. That is part of being made whole and complete. So, Dr. Tashina, thank you so much for being here today. Tell us, how can my guests contact you? I mean, how can my audience contact you?
yeah, absolutely. So I'm on all social media platforms at Dr. Tashina Reader. You can contact me through my website at drtashinareader.com. And if you want to email me to ask more questions about my services, you can email me at info at drtashinareader.com.
I love that. I love that. So if you have not already, click the links down in the show notes. Go ahead and do that now. Register for this upcoming retreat in the Bahamas. The spaces are limited. So the numbers have capped because Dr. Tashina desires, and I desire as well, for it to be very personable, so there are limited seats available. So go ahead and book that, register, get your flights, do all the things. And as far as this podcast goes, if you have enjoyed listening to this episode and you want to hear more topics like love, health, wealth, and career, we've got you covered here. So if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or another streaming service, go ahead and follow us. I promise you, you won't regret it. And it really helps us out, okay? So it helps get the word out about the information that we're sharing. It's also a way that you can really help another woman, and it's super easy. It only takes a second to share. It only takes a second to download or like. And one of my goals in starting this podcast was really to create community and connection. So leave comments for us and we will answer. We're there to answer your questions or give us feedback. Tell us what your biggest takeaway for today's episode was. So thank you so much for doing all the things, subscribe, like, all of that. It really helps me in my life mission and supporting other women. So thank you.